Welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
I'm your co-host, Rich Gear, here. And Doug, you've got an interesting premise here. When your teacher doesn't share your values. How do you want to start this off, Doug?
Well, I wanted to reprise a little bit of the experiences that I might have had many years ago when I was going to college. And I was dealing with a lot of the questions that I was trying to work with at the time, trying to figure out where my faith and my values lied in terms of opposition to what I've been starting to hear in the classroom.
Okay.
I was.
This is at Michigan State, right?
This was at Michigan State.
Okay, this was after high school then.
Yeah, there was a little bit of this in high school, but and actually a lot of the things I started getting interested in started in high school because I was doing some experiments at the time trying to create life in the test tube because I found the idea of the chemistry of life pretty fascinating, and I figured that if evolution was true, then you could actually take simple compounds and combine them together to form the complex compounds of life. And
you actually did physical experiments to try to empirically verify, can things get more complicated, or can things actually, you can create proteins from amino acids and that kind of stuff.
And my experiments were actually fairly sophisticated, and you have these electrical sparks that you put into it, and I had these test tubes set up and I found out that I was taking the wrong approach, because if I had the amino acids in solution, well, in order for them to combine, you have to take the water out. Well, if you have them in water, that doesn't really help. And so there's certain things I found out in these in the chemistry of life that really didn't help me around. And so I was really questioning that once I got to college, and at the same time I found out that a lot of the chemistry classes where I had some stuff in a high school honors institute class I took at LCC, in high school, they actually allowed you to do experiments and investigate your own questions. And
wait, this was LCC. This was high school or college?
In high school, they had LCC had a program for high school students.
All right. I see.
And it was actually where I learned most of my chemistry was in those 2-year summers that I took those classes, and so it was really pretty amazing. And the teacher was excellent as well, and we actually got into some physical chemistry there, which is over my head. But that's what you do if you want to learn something. You immerse yourself into something that is way beyond so you can get stretched. And so when I got to the university itself and started taking the classes, a lot of it was really difficult because it wasn't presented very well. And so that was a question that I had when I was trying to do this stuff is, if the teacher is starting to tell us certain things that and not giving me the answers that I need here, then what am I going to do with this? And I also noticed that there was a class called American Thought and Language.
The old ATL classes, I remember those.
The old ATL classes, and the first one was fairly boring. The second one, the guy was a communist. And the third guy was pretty intriguing, because what he did was a little bit more what got me started in thinking about all of this was that he said, write about what you believe in.
Really? Well, yeah, but you realize this was, 40 years ago, Doug? When you were in college? 40?
Well, that was 50 years
50 years ago, yeah. It's gotten a lot worse than that probably now these days. This
fellow was a great teacher, and I remembered him. He was really a good fellow to learn from. There's certain teachers that are worthless, and there's some that are.
You get people that have the gift, yeah. There are people that are really good teachers, and there are people that just did for a paycheck. But all right, so Doug, you had a class, or classes. You probably since you were in a science major, but even back there, and 50 years ago, the Darwinian paradigm was pretty prevalent in at university level areas. I still remember when. Did you go with me, Doug? I remember we went back to Waverly High School, and we talked to the science class there. Were you with me on that one?
I was not with you.
You were not there, okay. And I remember that, and the teachers were pretty, they're pretty even-handed, but they allowed me to come in. We didn't even have as good arguments as we do now. We have some better ones. I mean, some of the ones I think stand up. They've always stood up, and they still stand up. But we talked about several things in there, and the teacher at the end of it goes, "Man, I've been brainwashed." Totally was an evolutionary guy, but he thought at this he was, and because they were asking me questions of that. And I remember another time, a guy came in there and he was a kid. He was just a kid, and I was the adult coming in there. But they wanted me to share. This was at DeWitt High School. The first one was Waverly High School, which where we both went to. But the other was at DeWitt, and this was in probably 25 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. Anyway, and this was a kid. Whoever's you got to watch out for this guy. He's an atheist. He's really smart, and I go, well, if he is, but he ended up becoming a believer after listening to my presentation. So these are kind of ways that comes in there, and we talked for another hour and a half after the class was over. But the point of it is, Doug, is when you are in a position where you're a student and you do not have the authority, the teacher has the authority.
Right.
Okay, and he could give you a bad, good, failing grade if you don't answer it the way he wants you to answer it. And we know, Doug, based on shows we've done in the past, we've done books or done shows on Jerry Bergman's books, for instance, the Criterion and Slaughter of the Dissidents and things like that. So Jerry, I'm giving you a plug. Anyway, the point of it is that even professors are getting fired, censored, ostracized if they come out against the dominant paradigm. So what does a student do, Doug? I mean, when you get a situation like that, I'll cut to one chase, because I remember, I think it was your daughter, I think it was Linda, but I could be wrong here, and she was but as a student, she got a class, and she said, okay, here's the answers you want, but here's the real answers.
Right. And
the teacher couldn't do it because she knew the stuff. I'm not saying, got to be careful of the teacher, you're being lippy and they still might fail you. But she did that. She goes, here's the answers you want, but this is the real answer.
Yeah, she got an E on that.
Yeah, because I was a fair teacher. But sometimes these teachers are not fair. They really are not. So what do you do when that happens? You got to get a grade. You're in the university and you need a credit. I know a lot of creationists. I don't know a lot of them, but I mean, I'm aware of a lot of people who are creationary teachers, students, and they're afraid this is coming out of the closet. It's more dangerous for a creationist than it is for a homosexual. You know what I'm saying? Much more dangerous. And so I'm saying, what would your approach be, or did you want to go somewhere else before we get to that point?
Well, the approach I would say is that you need to first of all make a wise choice as to where you're getting your education. What
There's that.
What institution you're going to go to, and if you go to pay somebody to teach you, you'll want your best money's worth. And so if you have a Christian college with a good reputation, that's going to be an advantage, especially one that has a strict biblical worldview. There's some that really don't, and if you start with that firm foundation, it helps. And then the next thing that was helpful for me, and this was at Michigan State as well, is to find a teacher or a professor who shares your values, and ask them if they could be a mentor to you.
And they do exist, Doug, even in the most, I'd say, reprobate, fallen, not I would say conducive to Christian values universities. There are professors there, but like Doug, if you get into let's say a major and you want to, you go to a Christian college and you're trying to figure out, well, you got to make a decision. What is it the idea if you're going to get a job when you get out of that university, or you want to stand for what you're doing, what you want for. Not all the Christian colleges have the programs you need to get, let's say, in an engineering or a doctor or something like that. And so what do you do when you get stuck in a situation like that, Doug?
Well, it's tough. You have to evaluate your priorities sometimes. Yeah. And in my case, I ended up making the decision that as a chemistry major, it wasn't something that I was going to carry on to its fulfillment. I decided that, do I really want to spend the rest of my life in this smelly laboratory with all these carcinogens? and so that was one factor. I was interested in it. I loved the science, I loved the chemistry, but I also understood that there is a price that I would have to pay ultimately for my decisions, and so what I really at that point didn't really know where I was going to go, but I was able to cobble together a degree before I got drafted into and went into the Navy, which was in physical science, and so I took some geology courses and biochemistry and physics and math and stuff like that, to put together a degree that I could actually graduate with, and it was a interdisciplinary type of study, and that actually helped in what we're doing, but it didn't ultimately become my career at all. And I got waylaid by the Navy, and
so the best laid plans,
And so, but when I afterwards I searched around all the inventory of the things I had learned, and out of that came the fledgling career of computers.
Yeah, you got in it kind of early. Well, Doug, I like what you say here. You quote in scripture here, 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says, "There is no temptation that has come upon you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that you are able, but with the temptation also makes a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. I think that's I think that's when you talk about a biblical worldview. There, you can be light, and there are ways to go through there. I think when I think about it is, I think of Daniel. It doesn't mean you're not going to be maybe thrown to the lion's den or thrown in a fiery furnace sometimes, but they were able to come through because they were faithful in the middle. They were in the belly of the beast. He was in the heart of Babylon, advisor to King Nebuchadnezzar, about as pagan a king as you can get, and yet he was able to shine and was integrity. And I think believers fail to understand that. Look, it's not as though we have nobody defending us. It's not like we have nobody backing us up. But there are times when you might be called to walk on water, and if you take your eyes off of Jesus, you're going to sink. And that's very difficult in the middle, because you're talking about kids, Doug. I mean, in college, they're adults technically. Well, some of them are 18 to 22, but they're kids. You know what I mean? They don't have the wherewithal necessarily to know some of the stuff. But if you fix your mind on certain scripture, certain things of advice before you get challenged, then when the challenge comes, you're more likely to be able to not only survive but thrive.
You want to respond respectfully to your teacher.
Yes, I think. This is what I thought. The next paragraph here, we had a little outline here, Doug. If you are in a class where the materials presented conflict with your beliefs, there are ways to respond properly so that it will preserve your grades. How does that work? It's like iron sharpening iron. Learning about other beliefs in comparison with what you believe can be an exercise that will ultimately strengthen your faith, as long as it doesn't take you out. Because I see a lot of people they go into these things, they go to college, and they're naive, Doug.
Right.
They're raised in the church, and they have no idea what the world's like. You know what it reminds me of? It's like, Doug, when I was a little kid, oldest of 9 kids, and we never got sick. I was always trying to fake getting sick because I didn't want to take an exam sometimes. I was always trying to get out of it. And we never got sick. You know why? Because our house, my mom tried her best. With 9 kids, it was hard to keep the house clean. But all these house beautiful, those kids were always sick because they never had any resistance to germs. If you don't learn about what the people are talking about, you have no defense when you go to college. You're in some little Christian ghetto, I'm not saying expose people just to get, but you got to inoculate them against the disease. Otherwise, they're going to catch it and die. And sometimes we fail to do that as Christians, to teach people the other viewpoints. Not that we think they're right, but say, why do you think this is wrong? I remember taking Doug when I took a guy to Richard Dawkins. Mm-hmm. These guys were terrified to go see him, but they'd been taught. I did a lot of teaching for him, but it wasn't just me. But I said, so what do you think? And I go, that guy was lame. He spent 2 hours telling you why an airplane wing was designed and a bird wing was an accident, which is infinitely more complicated than an airplane wing. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying they saw through the whole subterfuge. Christians, you can do that. But then, Doug, what is the art form of how you could be gracious or do the things when the professor is like really a polemicist for evolution or anti-Christian beliefs? Whatever it is, it could be the whole gay agenda. It could be whatever it is, abortion. These professors bring all this stuff in there now. Mm-hmm. Okay, so and then they give you an exam. How do you we have to do somewhat generic because we can't. It's everybody's specific class and everybody's specific situation is unique or different. Okay, we understand that, but there are basic rules, Doug. That I think
you need to be able to answer the questions as they are presented.
Okay,
and it isn't your job at the point to convert your teacher on the final exam. That often doesn't end well. But the thing is that if you are able to resolve the questions in your own mind to understand what the real answers are, then you can. It's okay to go down, put down the answers that they're expecting. That's what you're going to get your grade for learning the material as they presented it.
Okay,
so that they are able to give you the grade that you deserve. And there can come a time when you're challenged to express your beliefs, either in your writing or in your speech, giving a speech, and you can sort of tread carefully with that.
Yeah.
Giving respect to the teacher who has authority over you. It's your jurisdiction that you have. If you don't have jurisdiction to be an authority in the area, then you have to respect your teacher. But when you express your Christian faith, do it with a logical integrity and well thought out arguments.
Doug, I think also there's a matter of conscience here. It's like you get one person who is able to go do this nice gracious thing, and then there's other people like John the Baptist said, you're living in adultery with your father's, with your sister or whatever, your husband's wife or whatever, and he gets his head chopped off. Yeah. Uh-huh. And if you're willing to get your head chopped off, and that's what you feel you're called to do, sometimes you have to do that. But most of the time, that's not. God says, all right, I need you to fight over here. Yeah. And if your head's chopped off now and you don't get your degree, I need you to go in here. It's tough. It's a tough thing.
Your battles.
Yeah, it's a tough thing. Because there's a biblical adage where it says, and talk about governmental authorities, submit to the authorities, obey them so things will be peaceable. We understand that. But there are times when you have to disobey those same governmental authorities. Like when Peter said, you tell me I can't preach the gospel, I got to go out and preach it. Mm-hmm. And that's a matter, that's where your roots need to go down to this. And it's hard, you're telling 20-year-olds to do this because that's what you're talking about, Doug. Yeah. I mean, they're technically, they're older, but they still are not, they've not lived life, they've not been betrayed, they've not had disappointments, other kinds of things that could really temper your responses and your wisdom. I love kids sometimes because the filters are off. We're trying to say, you can have the filters off, but understand, like I said, what you said, Doug, was really good. Mm-hmm. It doesn't usually end well, not in the grade point. So you got to understand that, and that's the thing you have to really realize. There is going to be a price to be paid, and is that the price you need to pay at this point? And that's a matter between you and the Lord, really. I mean,
it was interesting. My experience, I took it's possible that it won't be treated fairly,
Oh, you won't.
And I took an independent study on radioisotope dating, and the geology professor that I took it from did not take very kindly to the treatise that I was writing about it, pointing out the flaws in the method. And he would not give me a grade for the course until I rewrote the paper in a way that was favorable to evolution. So I had a choice there. Well, I can write fiction too, and I had to, but it was sort of like back to what I was saying before, is learning the material so that you can demonstrate to the teacher that you have actually learned the material and understand it, so that then if you present the other side, it's okay to present the other side, but so that you will be able to show that you can understand both sides.
I think that's wisdom, Doug, because if you show that you know what there is, you know the material, they can't really they can't really downgrade you, even if you believe something totally antithetical to that position. They say, well, you do know the material. Now,
but if they do,
sometimes they can even do that. Then
they can hammer you anyway because they just don't like you.
Yeah,
and you can't do much about that. And you can probably expect that there will be quite a measure of that going on in any of your academic environment. That people will take issue with what you have and try to destroy you, and because if they find themselves threatened by you, that's not a good thing, and they will retaliate. And so we have to be very careful with that. And so, like I said, answer the test questions according to what the materials presented are, and what your teacher expects, and it isn't necessarily your place to correct your teacher, and so you have to be careful to be just very gracious and go out and get your grade and get your degree and accomplish what you can with what God gives you.
So you even know Doug, our friend Jerry, he should have, as I understand it, 4 PhDs. He's got 2. But this guy's written on, 70 books, Doug? 50 books?
Yeah.
70 books? A lot of books. And but he was refused 2 of them because by that time he'd come out of the closet as a creationist.
Right.
And they refused him that PhD because of his positions on creation. And that's the thing that you really understand. Like I say, Doug, a lot of classes, it doesn't matter too much, but in the science one, there's really a big bias. And right now, it's not reasonable, but there it is. But you could find this even, like you said, in the ATL thing, where you had a guy who's a communist, and they're going to try to browbeat you into believing socialism or communism, or there used to be years ago they said, well, communism really has only been successful in a couple of 2-bit countries and a university professors. That's about the only place where it's still being preached, because it's failed everywhere else it's tried, But nevertheless, they still do, and they try to. It's not about so much instruction. A lot of times, it's about indoctrination, and so that's another thing, Doug. I think if you learn the difference beforehand, Doug, what's the difference between indoctrination and education?
Right.
And there is a difference. I mean, obviously, when I say it that way, bald-facedly, you say, oh, yeah, somebody's trying to push a viewpoint. University professors are human just like anybody else, and if they believe something strongly, they're going to push it. They're not objective any more than scientists are objective. You say, well, we can do the scientific method. I said, no, you can't do that with historical science. Mm-hmm. You can't go back in time and look at a T-Rex bone and say 65 million BC. That doesn't say that on there. You got to extrapolate from all kinds of presuppositions. So we all have a matter of those kinds of things, but you can be very even-handed. As I say, I've had a lot of respect, even though she's an evolutionist. What's her name? Mary Schweitzer, who found hemoglobin in the T-Rex bones. She was an evolutionist, and of course, they said this can't be true because it can't last that long. Well, now all they do is they kind of bait and switch. Well, I guess hemoglobin does last 65 million years, but which we know it doesn't. But the point of it is, she was honest to admit that it actually existed. And there are teachers, even with as prejudiced as they are, that will be honest and even-handed. Try to find those teachers too. You can find them. They do exist.
Something that also helps very much is to find one of your peers, one of the one of your colleagues that you are going to school with, to have fellowship with, to pray with you on a regular basis, and to work through issues with you. That's a real help, because then you have others around you supporting you, and you can support them as well.
Yep.
I've found that to be very true in everywhere I've gone. From each of the jobs that I've been at, where from the Navy, the reason I survived the Navy was because of the few Christian friends that I was able to hook up with, that I found. I'd seek out on board ship or on board the base other people who really stood out as a Christian that really believed what they believed, and so that was a real help. And then in each of my jobs, I took it on myself to find another person where I could share a fellow, maybe once a week or twice a week, where we get together and study the Bible at lunch. It's a powerful way to experience a uplifting, that prayer experience where God is able to go in and take care of issues as they crop up. It seems like whenever I've done that, the job itself has gone well.
Doug, it's funny. We've touched on three things. I've always, over the years, I thought it's a three-legged stool that keeps you up. Mm-hmm. We touched on all three of them tonight, believe it or not. Prayer, fellowship, and the Word. Mm-hmm. And those three things will help a Christian survive in the worst situations. And fellowship among saints. Somebody will hold your feet to the fire when you're kind of going off base. Get your foundations deep with prayer and study of the Word, and then you get your biblical worldview. You get your connection with God directly, and connection through Him through fellowship of the saints. Those are, I call it the three-legged stool that keeps Christians on track. And we talked about all three of those tonight, Doug. Do you know that? All three of them. It just kind of worked out that way.
A tripod of stability, right?
Tripod of stability. I never heard it called that way, but I'll go with it. Mm-hmm. Sounds good to me. Yeah.
So I think that it is possible to survive a college experience, a high school. There are pitfalls everywhere you go, whether it's in academia or on the job or in the military, like I experienced. Those are all different kinds of challenges for me. But I found that using some of these principles that we've explained tonight can help you in surviving this world where things are not always going the way that you think that they should be going.
Amen.
We hope that you enjoyed our TV show tonight on Revolution Against Evolution. We'll see you next time.